In the next 3 minutes, you're going to learn everything you need to know about repos and reverse repos and how they work in banking. This won't cover everything, but it'll cover enough for you to understand exactly what's going on. So people on Wall Street love to overcomplicate things, which is why they can charge such high fees. But basically, what a repo or reverse repo boils down to is a pawn shop. It's the easiest way to understand it. So this person needs some money. This guy has some money. So let's say she needs $100 and he says, okay, I will give you $100. And then at the end of the month, you're going to give me back $105. And to make sure you live up to your end of the bargain, you're going to give me this as collateral. So I'm going to give you 100. You're going to give me this to hold for you. After 30 days, you're going to give me back $105 and I'm going to give you the watch back. And if you don't give me the $105, I'm just going to sell that watch to somebody that comes in the store because I know it's worth more than $105. So I won't be out any money. And that is essentially a repo transaction. So lots of banks and even broker-dealers use repos or reverse repos, but the person who uses it most is the Federal Reserve, and they use it for liquidity. They pump money into the system when liquidity is needed and take money out when it's not needed. And the way they do that is with repos and reverse repos. So just like a pawn shop, this works the same way. We have a lender and a borrower, and some assets and money, right? So the borrower has these assets, but they don't want to sell them. They just need some money temporarily. So they're going to hand them over to the lender, and the lender is going to give them the money, minus a small haircut, and then they agree that at some time in the future, he's going to be able to buy it back at a little bit more than he paid. And that difference will be equivalent to paying interest, just like at the pawn shop. And sometimes the repo is overnight, so it happens fairly quickly for small amounts of money. But when you're talking about trillions of dollars, that adds up. So on Monday, he turns over the assets, and let's say it's $100 worth of assets. And this lender, just to make it easy, will turn over $99 in cash. And then the next day, he's going to pay back the money and he's going to get the assets back. And because these are very liquid assets, if he doesn't give the money back, the lender will just take the assets and will sell it and will get probably $100, maybe somewhere between 99 and 100. And that's how things work when they work. And in times of crisis, this guy might need money and he goes to the lender and he says, this is $100 worth of assets. But what if the lender says, well, times are tough, so I'm only going to give you $80 for this? And this is what happened during the great financial crisis. Because the difference between these two prices works out to an interest rate, that's why interest rates spike in times of crisis. So how exactly does that work with the Fed? If you remember the problem that we had with inflation during the pandemic, let's say that the Federal Reserve is trying to tamp down inflation. One way to cool down inflation is to raise interest rates to make it more expensive to borrow money, which will reduce spending, which will reduce asset prices, which will tamp down inflation. So the Federal Reserve has a lot of government bonds, and then they sell them to a financial institution, and that financial institution gives the Federal Reserve cash. And when they do that, money is sucked out of the financial system because these financial institutions that bought the bonds now don't have the money to lend to borrowers. So there's less money in the system, and if the same amount of borrowers are chasing a smaller pool of money, interest rates will go up. When the Fed thinks inflation is under control, they're going to buy back the bonds and give the financial institution the dollars. And by buying back the bonds and giving the financial institution the dollars, there's now more money in the financial system, and so it becomes cheaper to borrow and interest rates go down. So I mentioned that banks and broker-dealers are involved in this market too. Well, why do they need to sell the assets and buy the assets? Well, let's say you have these government bonds that pay 5% a year, and they pay that 5% at fixed intervals. If you buy and sell that between the payments, you can get more than that 5%. So maybe you can turn that 5% bond into a 7% bond by participating in these repo agreements every day. And you don't want to sell the assets, but you're okay with lending them out because then you're still going to get the interest rate that you're getting annually. And on the other days when you're selling them back and forth, you're also getting this tiny amount of money that works out to interest. So broker-dealers are required to have a certain amount of net capital, and if they have more than that amount, they can buy these assets and sell them back and make extra money on the money that they had that's more than required under the net capital rules. And if they are below net capital, and if they are below the required net capital, they can sell the assets and bring cash in. And it's very important because under the net capital rules for broker-dealers, you have to have at least the minimum net capital at all times. So you can't be short. And if you are short, you got to do something about it right away, which is where these repo transactions come in. So when the Fed is sending out money and bringing in treasuries, that's a repo. And when they're selling treasuries and bringing in money, that's a reverse repo. You're probably not going to remember the difference between a repo and a reverse repo. They're the same thing, and what you call it is going to depend on which side of the arrow you're standing on. But that's all you need to know about that. And if you got something useful out of this, just like and subscribe to this channel and you'll see more videos like this. So I'm a financial lawyer with 25 years experience in the markets. I worked in mergers and acquisitions, derivatives. I'm putting these videos out to explain some concepts. None of this is intended to be legal advice. I'm a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. And nothing I've said here creates an attorney-client relationship. Seek your own legal counsel. And if you've got questions about what we just discussed or you want to see other things in future videos, just leave a comment below. Have a great day, everyone.